I'm Julie Fei Fan Balzer, and paper piecing is one of my new favorite techniques because it is so easy and it gives you such good results. So I made this pillow cover, which you can see says love. Now I never would have been able to do this if it was done with traditional piecing because there's just too much math for me. But paper piecing involves a pattern, like you can see the one that I have in front of me, where you just sew on the lines. So let me show you how easy this is to do. This pattern is literally numbered for me, 1, 2, 3. So I know exactly how it goes together. So I know that I need 3 pieces of fabric, and each piece of fabric should be a little bit larger than the space that you're intending for it to go into. So for instance, this would fit perfectly for 2. This is a good choice for 1, and then here is my 3. So how does this all actually go together? Well, I like to use a light box, but you can also use a window or just a light, anything like that that might be in your studio. So I can see the pattern. I'm actually going to flip it over to the back, okay? Then what I want to do is I want to take my number 1 piece and go ahead and put it on here so that it covers up all of the lines and there's at least a 1/4 inch around, and that's with the correct side facing me, okay? Then I want to put my number 2 piece on here, and I want to make sure that it's going to be big enough to fit on here, and I can see through it there, and once it is, then what I want to do is I just want to put it on the seam line so that it's crossing over that other piece. I'm going to use a pin, and I'm going to pin it directly to the paper, and again, this is right sides together. That's really important. Then we're going to go ahead and take this on over to the sewing machine. Now, paper piecing is one of those things that is sort of an endless circle of going from the sewing machine to the iron and back again. So I'm going to flip this over, and if I did a good job pinning it, which I didn't, it should be on here. So let me just repin this in place so that it stays. There we go. Now what I want to do is I want to sew on the line between 1 and 2. So I have my foot, I'm going to start a little bit before the line, and then I'm going to go ahead and I have a straight stitch. You can, if you wish, by the way, lengthen this out or shorten it. I'm actually going to shorten it to 1.4. So that it's easier to rip the paper out, because this is just regular computer like printer paper. So I'm going to stitch on the line, and I'm going to go just a little bit further, then cut the thread, and then go ahead, and now we're heading to the cutting mat. So once I'm here at the cutting mat, I'm ready to go ahead and take out my pins. I have a ruler here, okay, which has a special ridge for a 1/4 inch. And what I do is I fold the paper back right at the seam, okay? Right where that seam is, and you can see how easily the paper folds. I put the ridge of the ruler right against that seam, and then I'm gonna use my rotary cutter to trim. Now I should have a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when I go to my iron and flip this over, I can iron it just like so. Super duper easy, okay? Then I'm gonna take my next piece, and again, you can use the light box, you can hold it up, you can eyeball it any way that works for you, but you want to make sure that this next piece of fabric is enough to cover that whole area, okay? And then you just want to overlap it right here. So then I'm going to pin this into place, just like so. And again, this is right sides together. And then if you guess that we're headed back to the sewing machine, you're 100% right, because paper piecing is all about sewing machine, cutting, iron board, and back again. So when I'm in my studio, I like to set it up so it's a nice, easy circle. And again, I start a little bit before, then go ahead and stitch right down that line. And this is what I mean about it being so easy and exact. You don't have to measure, you don't have to think about it. You literally print the pattern out of your computer and then sew on the line. Let me pull my pins out and flip that over. Now this doesn't quite look like the block yet, and that's because we have one more important trimming job to do. And that is when we flip it over, we want to go ahead and trim 1/4 inch away from these lines. So I'm just going to use the little ridge on this ruler, or if this has the seam allowance already built in, which it might, you can go right on the line. You just have to know your block and decide which way it's supposed to go. So let me just trim this, and you will see in no time at all, I'm gonna have a beautiful paper piece block that I hardly had to do any work for. And again, no measuring. I love that. Makes my life so much happier. So there you go. And let's flip it over for the magical moment. Ta-da! You can see my beautiful block, all those seams, and it really, if you do it in another color, you can see how much the block changes, and you can put together a beautiful quilt in no time at all. There is one other little trick that I want to show you though, which is sometimes you have a block like this one, where it says 1, 2, and then it says 1A and 2A. And that's because this is meant to be done in 2 pieces, because it would be impossible to put this together in one single block. So this is a very simple thing to do. You can see that both of these have been trimmed already, okay? So all that I need to do is I can pull right off the paper. It's always scary the first time you do it, but you're just gonna pull it right off the paper. Okay, here is my block, and you want to make sure, this is why we changed the seam length. You want to make sure that you get that paper out of there. Then I know that these 2 parts go together like this, and I can even look to see on here where this seam is lining up. And then once I have that exactly where I want it, I can pin it. And again, you can use the light box for this if it's easier, but I'm gonna take this back to the sewing machine and I'm gonna be able to stitch it right on. Let me flip this over so you can see. Let me pin it a little more out of the way. But you'll see, I can now stitch it right along this seam and know that all of this is gonna line up exactly where I want it. So here we go. Easy peasy stitching, you don't even have to think about it. I like that a lot, and it really just makes for something easy to do. Now you can buy special paper for paper piecing that's supposed to rip out a little more easily, but I honestly have never had a problem with my computer paper. So back we go. Now you remember how this process works. Right where you stitched, you fold it over, you take your seam, you can trim it as necessary. We already knew that this was trimmed, so it doesn't need it. We're gonna go ahead, unpin it, flip it over. You guys, isn't it amazing how these blocks just come together in no time at all? Because as soon as we trim this, it's gonna be absolutely perfect. I always love this moment because it feels like something really exciting is happening. And what you're doing is something super easy. So I'm just gonna keep on trimming this. Now, I like to leave my blocks on the paper until I'm ready to assemble them into the full size piece, whether it's a quilt or a pillow cover like I have here, an apron, anything like that. But check it out. How cool is this block that we made? Now, if you wanted to make the letter blocks, you'll notice that the letters are all backwards. Well, the O and the V, not necessarily noticeable, but with the L and the E, you really see it. So what you would do after you made the blocks, which turn out the opposite or front ways, is you would go ahead and rip all of the paper off and then stitch together as you normally would with a 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you could finish up your pillow. So even if you're a beginning sewer and a beginning quilter, I'm telling you that paper piecing is a super easy way to make perfectly precise, beautiful blocks out of little scraps of fabric.